All right, let's move over. Let's bring in our old friend to the show. His first appearance. I'm sure it's not going to be the last. Our buddy Mark Sleboda is joining us for the first time on the TMI Show. Good morning or evening to you, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Ted, Manila, thanks for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on the TMI Show. It's so nice to meet you.
First time.
First time. Have we met before? I don't know. You look familiar.
We should.
I might sound familiar. I don't know if I look familiar.
That's right. Well, I know what you look like.
Yes.
So for those who don't know, Mark Sleboda is an international relations and security analyst. He's a former U.S. Naval nuclear engineer, and he hosts The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, which I think you can find back, right, on YouTube, Substack, Telegram, all that. Is that still the case?
It is back. I will not be posting on YouTube any further due to the censorship regime, but it is. You can at least catch the back episodes there. I will be posting other things on other platforms in the future.
Okay, so you're working on that. So then you got to tell us where to find it and all that stuff so we can tell everybody how to reach you and support you on those new platforms. Because, Ted and I are in the same boat, obviously trying to figure out all the different platforms where we can go, where we won't be censored. So
good luck with that.
Yeah, I know. Ted, you want to start us off? I'm going to get this video, look for some video.
Sure, absolutely. So, Mark, in our previous iteration and my post-Manila iterations, has always been our go-to person to talk about the Russo-Ukrainian conflict and some other stuff. So we thought we would check in the wake of the statement by the G7 that Ukraine is now on an irrevocable course towards NATO membership. And we kind of talked about this in the headlines. I'm sure you didn't hear this, Mark, but we were kind of like making fun of the idea that anything is irrevocable or irreversible I'm sure that like if an asteroid hits the Earth, that Ukraine might have trouble joining NATO. Now
they'll join posthumously.
Yes, if whatever's left of Ukraine, the ashes could join it. But I wanted to just generally check on the status of the war, and I really wanted to get your thoughts about the G7 statement that Ukraine is definitely going to be a member of NATO at some point in the future. We don't know when or what those circumstances would look like, and also about the news that NATO is complaining. I love this, that North Korean troops are fighting for Russia in Ukraine, and that the North Koreans, are destabilizing the situation between Russia and Ukraine. Mark, I'm sure you have thoughts.
Yeah, well, hell, if the G7 says something, well, then it must be so, because we all know that the G7 is the most important multilateral institution in the world today.
Obviously.
Not so much. So yeah, I mean, this has been the refrain really since 2008. I mean, back that far. When in Budapest at a NATO summit, it was declared that Ukraine and Georgia would one day become members of NATO. And when polls at the time in Ukraine showed the majority of the population had absolutely no interest in NATO, but they were going to be made to want to join NATO one way or another. So I mean, they can talk all they want, but saying so isn't going to make it so. And this is obviously still going to be settled on the battlefield, however long it takes to do that. And there, it has to be said that the conditions are looking increasingly bleak. We have had comments in the British media where off the record, right, anonymous British military are saying that the Kiev regime's military is close to defeat. Certainly in the Donbass. That is certainly in the Donbass, and they look unable to hold Russian forces to do anything more than slow them down anywhere else. and you're going to hear, I think within the next 3 months, a succession of these final redoubts in the Donbass, like Sleboda, Chasiv Yar, Pokrovsk, Krahova, Toretsk, Seversk fall one after the other, because Russia's not assaulting one of them right now. Russia is storming all of them at the same time. And they look set to possibly begin a new offensive of their own from the south in the Zaporozhye region within the next month. That is a distinct possibility from the buildup of forces and the artillery preparation and diversion and reconnaissance groups activity that we've seen there. So if only wishing and PR statements like Ukraine will join NATO actually won a conflict, well, then it would have been won long ago by the West, but it doesn't.
Mark, we got a viewer question for you. Adrian asks about Odessa and Kherson City, and how does Russia cross the Dnieper, on pontoon bridges?
Yeah. Okay. So I do not see an amphibious assault on Kherson City.
Did you say Nazi?
No, I wouldn't say that. Particularly not if you're saying this on YouTube, because you put that word together with Ukraine and there goes your channel. Yeah, I do not see a contested amphibious crossing of the Dnieper any point in the near future. I don't think that Kherson City is in Russia's priority list right now. I think that they will continue to operate on the east side of the Dnieper, that they will clean up Donbass, probably.
Mark, would that be, would the lack of it being a priority for this to capture the city be in part due to the logistical challenge of having to feed and take care of a major urban center?
That is a concern, right? But that at this point, while Russia is still fighting a war of attrition, there are two caveats. In order to pursue that war of attrition, increasingly it has to take more Kiev regime territory, whether that's their primary goal or not. And up until this point in the conflict, it hasn't been. But at the end of this conflict, the very minimum Russian goals, territorially wise, include all of the Donbass, Kherson, and Zaporozhye. And it has to be remembered that Russia did control Kherson City up until the fall of 2022, when they withdrew from it. So I don't think it's so much the logistical about supporting the civilian population of the city. I think it's logistical and the losses that would be incurred in a Dnieper River crossing. I think right now, with the big breakthrough that occurred at Avdiivka and now all the way through to Pokrovsk in the Kiev regime's defensive lines that they built up there over a decade of civil conflict in the country before Russia intervened, that Russia wants to finish the Donbass. It wants to bring that conflict to a close. And the way things are set now, Russia should, I believe, secure all of the Donbass, if the pace stays constant, by next summer.
How big is the Dnieper River?
It's a significant river, right? It's not something that can be crossed by troops and vehicles really anywhere.
They can't ford the river. They can't ford the river.
Yeah, they can't ford it, and even pontoon bridges across the Dnieper are a significant engineering challenge. Right, it's not like rivers in the Donbass region, like the Oskol or something, that can be easily pontooned. It's quite more significant than that. It may come at some point in this conflict, and to get to Odessa, right? That is first Kherson City, and then Nikolaev, and only then Odessa. So that's a much more significant challenge. And I think it would be far more likely that if Russia was to militarily move on Odessa, something they probably really don't want to do. If they have goals towards Odessa, they would probably prefer to achieve those politically rather than militarily have to take and damage a city that size, particularly a historically Russian city like Odessa, the historical significance of it. So I think Odessa is much later in this conflict, and hopefully it doesn't have to be settled militarily, but that may happen. But then Russia is more than likely to come to Odessa from the north after having already crossed the Dnieper in other locations, much like the Soviet Union did when they ejected Nazi Germany and their Western Ukrainian fascist allies in World War II from Odessa, rather than some type of amphibious or contested crossing of the Dnieper.
Mark, let's talk about these North Korean troops. Is that a real thing? Is that actually happening or not?
No, it's not. It's not. And I'm curious, did you say that NATO was complaining about that, or is that comments from the Kiev regime? Because
NATO is complaining.
NATO. Okay. Yes. All right. So as of late last week, the last time I heard of it, no one in the West had actually, backed this statements up. They were just ignoring it. No official government sources. So no, I do not believe that there are North Korean troops involved in the conflict. Now, North Korean troops may be learning behind the lines, right, because of an existing military alliance now, effectively, from Russian logistics, right? They may be interested in learning what Russia is doing, right? Sure. If you listen to Western military accounts, some of the artillery shells and perhaps even some of the ballistic missiles Russia is using are from North Korea, although there is no evidence that has been presented that can confirm that on the battlefield. And Russia and North Korea both deny it. But Russia does not need North Korean troops. It would add an international dimension and criticism of Russia in this conflict that Russia simply does not militarily need and does not diplomatically want. These claims, and these are ridiculous, right? The Kiev regime keeps taking pictures of Russian soldiers from the Far East, from Buryatia, and claiming, oh, it's North Koreans in Russian uniforms.
Oh, my God.
Hello? Russia has over 200 ethnicities. It is the largest country in the world. And
some of them look like me.
Are not white,
absolutely, they do.
Looking people. I mean, I know it's a shocker. In fact, large numbers of them are, right?
Well, the Germans used to complain about that too during World War II, the Asiatic horror.
Yeah, that's a whole feature of the Kiev regime's propaganda from the beginning, that Russia is the Asiatic Mongol hordes coming, and they are the shield of Western civilization from these Mongoloid Russian Asians. That has been part of the Kiev regime's Banderite, fascist, racist propaganda from before the conflict started.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I took umbrage to that because my great, I don't know how far back we go in great, but I have lineage. I'm a descendant of Mongolians. So this is like, so wait a minute, when you're complaining about the Russians who look like me, the folks in Ukraine complaining about faces like mine, it's just such racist bullshit,
It
and
is.
nobody in American mainstream media ever points that out when the race card is clearly vitally important, Mark. I mean, it is it's the main feature of the 2024 elections, don't you know? And
It's
and
really
Kamala
bizarre
Harris
too, because it's
says
like,
she's going to continue with with this war.
from the Ukrainian point of view, it's kind of like, okay, well, you're in a war with another country. I don't know. I don't really care what the people look like who are shooting at me, or I'm shooting at them. I mean, it's a war, right? Who cares what they look like? That's like a minor
Yeah,
detail.
well, that kind of goes against the whole ideology on the Kiev regime side that has driven so much of this conflict, though. I think all of these claims and they originate with the Kiev regime, if NATO has started to pick them up, it is the Kiev regime trying to drag NATO countries, maybe not all of NATO, but Western countries directly into the conflict. See, North Koreans are fighting on the Russian side. Really, they're not from Buryatia. You should be fighting directly on our side. And there are plenty of neocons throughout the West that will amplify that message and push it, lobbying for direct military intervention by NATO against Russia.
Well, Mark, let me throw that at you about the 2024 US presidential elections. I mean, we're roughly 2 weeks out, if you can believe it. Trump has said
Finally.
publicly, right, finally, can it be over? Trump
I'm just
says
sick of Americans talking about the election, to be perfectly honest.
talk about I mean, I live it. I'm in DC, right? I mean, I'm just like right in the thick of it. But Trump says he's going to end it immediately. It wouldn't have ever started, blah, blah, blah. He's getting a lot of blowback about that, but he's the only one talking about ending the conflict. Harris has vowed to continue military and financial support for Ukraine and NATO. And she talked about in her acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention, where she literally used the language to say that the US military is going to be the deadliest, most lethal fighting force in the US or in the world, and we're going to continue to back all of our friends around the world. What is your read being overseas now, living abroad? When you look over here and these two front runner candidates, it's one of these two that's going to win. How are people in Russia looking at what's happening and who might win?
Okay, I don't actually think people in Russia are too concerned about the U.S. election. I mean,
Really?
no,
it doesn't
Americans
make any difference
have
to them,
a belief that everyone in the world is waiting with bated breath to find out who wins the newest U.S. election, and we don't really care.
Mark, would that be different if the two candidates differed dramatically on Russia-Ukraine policy?
No, I don't think so. First of all, because no one believes anything a U.S. politician said. Donald Trump just said over the weekend that he told Putin he would bomb the center of Moscow, right? And the Russian, Medvedev, the former Russian president and prime minister, and the Russian presidential spokesman just rolled their eyes and like, sure, he did. Yeah, he said that. All right. They have said outright, that statements like this are just part of campaign rhetoric. But the truth is that Russia has, endured a Trump presidency before. And Trump campaigned on a policy of improving relations with Russia. It was the one consistent foreign policy position that he campaigned on. And what happened when he got elected? He hired a bunch of neocons to run his foreign policy, and Russian-U.S. relations decreased to the worst point they had been at that point. He enacted hundreds of sanctions against Russia, and according to him, at least, he started already arming the Kiev regime with offensive U.S. military equipment even back then. So the official Russian government position on the U.S. election is that whoever's elected, it won't change U.S. foreign policy towards Russia or the conflict in Ukraine at all. Basically that, Americans think their president actually controls foreign policy, whereas the Russian government position is that, the U.S., if you want to call it the blob, as Ben Rhodes did, the deep state, the permanent bureaucracy, and that a president, whatever they may believe, when they come into office, find themselves restricted by the constraints of the office of the
Right.
presidency of the United States. So, but I mean, even if you look at the polls in the U.S., I just pulled up some YouGov polls on it, right? The concern about the conflict in Ukraine is not even in the top 50 issues for American voters. So it's hard to see how it can affect the U.S. election in any real way. It also says that the majority of Americans favor maintaining aid to the Kiev regime in Ukraine, military aid, or increasing it. And that even if you take a look at the Republican Party, Republican voters in isolation from, say, Democrats and independents, while 44% of Republicans are in favor of decreasing military aid to Ukraine, there's still 40% of them that want to keep it the same or increase it. All right, even among Republicans. So that being said, the idea that, the question of U.S. military aid being an important point in the U.S. election is wrong. I don't think it's important to U.S. voters at all. And what that means is that government policy will continue to ignore U.S. public opinion on it because they don't vote on the issue. They don't significantly care on it. And it also tells us, the same YouGov poll tells us, that as of August, most Americans still believe that the Kiev regime is winning the conflict, particularly after all the ridiculous noise about Kursk. So,
Well, yeah.
I mean, we have a severely not just not informed, but a severely disinformed American population on vital foreign policy issues like this.
I'll say,
De-informed.
yeah, like, oh God. I mean, I couldn't tell you with the video that I was looking to play while we were having this conversation. Every video that's on YouTube is completely the narrative that Ukraine is winning, Ukraine is winning. There's just nothing else.
Ukraine is
and I
winning.
think
Ukraine has always been winning. Ukraine
Ukraine,
will always be.
Ukraine is
Ukraine has
already winning.
Ukraine is already is in Moscow.
I made a phone call to the
They're in
future.
Buryatya, evidently, because they keep finding North Koreans.
This is just wild stuff. Well, Mark, we're going to have to leave it right there, but we obviously invite you back anytime. You are our go-to analyst, and I'm so annoyed about your channel, your personal YouTube channel, and what happened there, and hopefully the viewership will go and support you wherever it is that you move your stuff to, because your analysis is greatly needed. And we appreciate you being here with us as always. Mark, if you guys don't know, Mark Sleboda is an international relations and security analyst. He is a former U.S. naval nuclear engineer, and he is the host of The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, which you can find the archives of on YouTube and find him on Substack and Telegram. Mark Sleboda, our buddy, thank you so much for carving out some time for us.
Thank you. And it's so great to see you two together again.
Oh, it's good to be
Thanks,
back
Mark.
together, and it's great to see you too.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.